If someone came up to me and asked, what is the best year in gaming? I'd probably say 2007. So many amazing games came out this year. I could go down the list of how many incredible games and series that came out. In terms of Nickelodeon around 2007, we got some pretty fun shows like iCarly and El Tigre, though unfortunately we did get to see some shows get cancelled, such as Drake and Josh and Danny Phantom. And then we were getting stuff like But one thing is for sure is that we were going to get the next game in the Nicktoons Crossover series, and this one would be pretty interesting.
Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots, the video game. Kick some bots.
Like I said in my Volcano Island review, this was the second Nicktoons game I played, and it was on the Wii. I did also play its DS counterpart as well. Once again, we have the same developer and publisher as last time. And Nicktoons Attack of the Toybots was released in 2007 everywhere in the world, and it came out for the PS2, DS, and GBA, but it was also the first Nicktoons game on the Nintendo Wii. This was also the first and only Nicktoons game to be released in Japan, which is pretty cool since Nickelodeon isn't all that prevalent in Japan. Also, man, the Japanese version of SpongeBob is pretty wild. Like, did you know that in the Japanese dub, Plankton's played by a woman? Just wanted to point that out. Now for this review, once again, just gonna be sticking to the console versions. But this time, I'll not only be looking at the PS2 version, but I also thought it'd be pretty fun to look at the Japanese Wii version. So we'll be looking at the differences between both versions in this review. But yeah, let's get on with the show. So what's the story about this time? Professor Calamitous has returned, though this time with no other villains, and he has created an evil toy factory that's powered by ghost energy and fairy gas. Calamitous also kidnaps different Nicktoons from other worlds to create evil robot doppelgangers. All of this to win the biggest genius award on this television show. SpongeBob and Patrick stumble upon a toy factory in Bikini Bottom, and after some mishaps, they meet Tack, and afterwards they find the other Nicktoons and eventually meet the Chadbot, who agrees to help the Nicktoons if they find master models all around the factory. And that's pretty much the basic story, and while it's still a fun enough plot for what it is, I think this is the overall weakest story of the 4 games. While I think the humor is still funny,
call upon the power of Juju to open the door!
The rest of the story just kind of feels half-baked. The Nicktoons just kind of do things. It doesn't really flow well at all. Like every time they go to a new factory, there's no intro or anything to go along with it. They just show up, whereas in Volcano Island, or heck, even the original Unite, the story connected much better with those stages. I also think the interactions are a lot weaker. There aren't that many cutscenes this time around, and the cutscenes we do have are nowhere near as good as the previous games. Also, I need to bring this up, because this is really confusing. Now, it's heavily implied that Calamitous is working with the Urkins, since we see one of them on the chalkboard near the intro of the game, and the Master Model Chambers use Urkin technology. Heck, even Gur appears in the game. Yet, we never actually see them in game, and how Calamitous even met the Urkins in the first place. Not to mention, it's been a while since I've seen Invader Zim, but I don't think the Urkins are really willing to work with a human. And not to mention, Zim's not even in this game, at least in the console version. It's just a really weird detail that the story doesn't even go into. And if I have to be honest though, probably my favorite part of the entire story is probably the scenes with the Toybot minions and Calamitous. These scenes were pretty funny, and it's great that unlike Volcano Island, we actually get to see the villain throughout the game, as opposed to the very end.
But everyone can hear you!
What do you mean? This is a diary closet, isn't it?
It's being broadcast. They can hear you!
Why don't you tell me?
Again, there are funny moments here, I won't deny that, but it's overall the weakest story of the 4 games. Presentation-wise, honestly, there really isn't that much to say about it. The animations and voice acting is about on par with Volcano Island, which was pretty good. Though a weird thing about the Japanese version though, is that they still use the English voice cast. It's not dubbed in Japanese. Maybe it was a budget constraints thing, or maybe they didn't have access to the Japanese voice cast from each respective show. It's really odd. Environments look decent enough, though I prefer Volcano Island's color choices. The colors do get pretty bland in Toybots, especially in some of the factory stages. But the music. Oh man, this soundtrack is absolutely fantastic. I enjoyed Unite's orchestral music, and I liked Volcano Island's more tropical themes, but Toybot's soundtrack, oh man, it's just beyond amazing. Some of the music literally makes me want to dance to them. It's that good. Also, let me point out that the guy who did this soundtrack would also go on to do Doom 2016's soundtrack. Yeah, so overall, the presentation is about on the same level as Volcano Island, and has a fantastic soundtrack. So gameplay wise, it's pretty similar to before, and everything you could do in Volcano Island, you can do here. You platform through each stage and make it to the end, just like Volcano Island. One big change though is that there's no hub world, it's just a menu to choose the stage this time. I'm not upset by this since I do like the new menu design, and the music's great as always. The controls feel about as well as last time, but now you have a new ability where you could roll. Not really much to say about it, other than it's great for versatility in tight spots. One thing that I'm really happy about though is that you could choose whoever you want in any stage. No more predetermined character for each stage. You can choose whoever you want in every stage, which is a massive improvement over the last game. One thing though that is disappointing is that in Volcano Island, while the lines were unique and they talked about what was going on in the stage, in Toybots they repeat the same lines over and over and over again. It's disappointing, but there are a lot of playable characters this time around, so it kind of makes sense why every character doesn't have any unique lines anymore. All the playable characters from Volcano Island return, except Sandy though. I guess she went back to Texas after Volcano Island. Jimmy Neutron makes his return as a playable character after being unplayable in Volcano Island, which is awesome, and we also have a new Nicktoon joining the story, that being Tak. For those of you who are unaware, Tak originated from a video game series called Tak and the Power of Juju. It got some sequels and eventually got a TV series on Nickelodeon. I guess to promote the new series, they decided to have Tak be a part of the story for Toybots. There are also 4 other characters that you can play as. Gur, as I mentioned before, Jenny, Stimpy, and Rocco, which is really cool. They don't play a part in the story, but they are still really cool additions, especially since all of them have their original voice actors. Even Stimpy and Rocco, who haven't been seen since their shows got canceled in the 90s.
So many new experiences. So many things that look like litter boxes.
You get these 4 characters through master model chambers. Basically, in each factory stage, you'll come across these tubes with a character icon on them. If you have the corresponding character, you can enter it and you can do a little obstacle course, and once you do, you'll gain access to a master model chamber. And completing these, you'll get a blueprint of a Nicktoon character, or as I mentioned before, the 4 playable characters. If you do want to progress through the game, you will need to get a certain number of these master models, or you won't be able to continue on to the next stage. Thankfully, the menu does tell you which character you'll need, and what certain master model it is, and you could even go to a certain point of the stage to where the master model is, which is really convenient. I do like this system. I like how each character has a different obstacle course they need to finish, and I do like collecting these master models, and seeing the different Nicktoons on these blueprint sheets is pretty cool, almost like a history of Nickelodeon's Nicktoons. Now there are 3 characters that actually get their own special master model courses, those being SpongeBob, Danny, and Tak. SpongeBob gets these really fun slide levels, Danny gets these really cool shooting levels, and Tak gets these honestly kind of meh platforming levels. There are a total of 7 levels in this game. 5 of the levels are the standard platforming stages. The levels are much more obstacle based this time around, and the game in general is a lot more challenging than Volcano Island. I died quite a bit to these stages, but I really like the challenge here. It's a really nice change of pace. I also really like the enemies here. These toys are pretty cool looking, and I especially really like the designs of the teddies. Heck, with the cheat code, you could even play as one. It's not very useful since they have no master model tubes, but it's still pretty cool. Also, the projectiles are now these goop canisters you can fire at enemies, which I greatly prefer over the projectiles of the last game. They're much more powerful, and they feel a little bit better to use this time around. Besides the master models, you could also break these canisters to free fairies. There are 500 fairies in total, though I never actually got all 500, but from what I hear, you don't get anything for doing so. In the stages, there are also these circuits that kinda look like the Hollow Cube from Jimmy Neutron, that are used to buy costumes for the characters. These costumes are just as cool as the ones from the last game. So you noticed I said 5 of the 7 stages are platforming. So what are the other 2 stages? Well, they are these mech stages, where you run through and shoot a bunch of Toybot replicas of the Nicktoons. These are pretty boring though. All you do is walk and shoot enemies, and that's pretty much it. It's pretty monotonous. And you don't even need to worry about ammo for your weapons, it's unlimited. Also, to get into some version differences now, in the PS2 version, you point the analog stick to fire, which is really clunky. It just feels so stiff. I much prefer the Wii version where you just point to shoot. It feels so much better. PS2 version is also pretty glitchy. Like look right here where I'm literally dying over and over again in an infinite loop. And maybe it's just my disc that I have, but the cutscenes also stutter frequently. Like look at this scene right here.
The machine's controls are right.
Also, when a character speaks in a level, the music completely stops and the line plays.
Let's pull the stuffing out of
It just feels so unpolished. Thankfully, the Wii version was pretty stable, and I didn't really have any issues while playing this version. I will say though that I much prefer the button placement on the PS2 version, where you use circle or square to attack. On the Wii version, you use the D-pad to attack, which is really weird. Can't even change the button placement on the Wii version. It's only on the PS2 version where you could do that. From both my footage I use of both versions, there really doesn't seem to be any noticeable differences in terms of graphics, but maybe I'm not looking that hard. So bosses are... wait. What? There are no bosses in this game? What the heck? Why?
What?
I know the last 2 games' bosses were pretty mixed, but you could have had so many interesting ideas for bosses, especially with the theme this game has. Yeah, there's this one Jimmy tank in Amity Park, but I hardly count that as a boss. It's more of an obstacle that you have to destroy. In fact, the game's climax is so underwhelming. The Professor's Lair isn't awful, but it's nowhere near as good as this Summit Storm from the last game. Or heck, the final level in Unite was better than this. This just doesn't feel epic at all, and the game ends so anticlimactically. No final boss whatsoever, and the game just ends on just the Chadbot winning the Biggest Genius Award, and that's pretty much it. What a lousy way to end the game. This is definitely the worst part of the entire game. I will say also, this game handles multiplayer a bit differently than before. Instead of co-op with 2 players in the main story, it's a separate mode with just a couple levels to choose from, either mech or platforming. It's fine for what it is, and while I would be more upset with co-op not being in the main story, I'd imagine it'd be a nightmare to play co-op in these stages due to how much more harder this game is. Man, I am just so split with this game. Well, let me first say that I enjoyed Attack of the Toybots. It's a fun game. The platforming is even better than before. I like the master model hunting, the music is fantastic, I like the difficulty, and it's still a fun game. But the story is weaker than before, the mech stages aren't very good, the PS2 version is pretty unstable, no bosses whatsoever, and the game just ends on a really bad note. It's still better than Unite, but I don't think it's as good as Volcano Island. Volcano Island was just much more of a solid game overall. While Toybots is still a fun time, it has a lot more bigger problems than the previous game, and it's just an overall weaker product than before. Now, if you are gonna play this game, I highly recommend the Wii version over the PS2 version. Other than the D-pad being the attack button, it's just much more stable than the PS2 version. But yeah, that's all the time we have for today. Once again, I hope you all enjoyed this review, and I hope you all enjoyed the Nicktoons review marathon so far. But next time, we're going to be looking at the final Nicktoons crossover game, at least console-wise, Globs of Doom. Definitely the one I'm most interested to see how it holds up. But yeah, have an amazing day everyone, and take care!